Good morning. This is Representative Dave Pinto, the chair of the House Early Childhood Finance and Policy Division. I'm calling this meeting of the division to order. Welcome to members and staff, as well as members of the public who are watching on YouTube and the House website. As a reminder, this hearing is being conducted pursuant to House Rule 10.01, which allows for remote meetings. Just a few reminders that that members are going to be keeping, and those folks who are testifying will be keeping their microphones muted during much of the meeting, except for when they're speaking, just to preserve sound quality, and the staff will help with that as well. Members who wish to be recognized will continue to do so through the chair and have discussion and questions do that way. Do in that form. You'll want to use the raise hand feature on Zoom, and if you're dialed in, a reminder that you can press *9 to be to raise your hand. Any trouble, please contact our staff. There's a packet of committee materials that have been sent to members via email and via our public listserv. They've also been posted to the House website for our committee. And then there's a number of submissions from letters, et cetera, that have been submitted on today's bills. And then if other members of the public wish to submit a written comment or question, you can send that to our committee administrator, Alyssa Fritz. Her address is Alyssa, ALYSSA.Fritz, FRITZ @house.mn, alyssa.fritz@house.mn. And so with that, then, we will have the clerk take the roll to start our meeting as usual.
Representative Pinto, Chair.
Present.
Representative Katiza-Wattoon, Vice Chair.
Present.
Representative Franson. Representative Franson. Representative Bonner.
Present.
Representative Demuth.
Present.
Representative Heinzman.
I'm here.
Representative Morrison. Representative Pryor.
Present.
Representative Wozlowick.
Present.
Representative West.
Here.
There we go. Quorum is present. And so our next order of business is to approve the minutes of our meeting of April 28th. If I can ask the Vice Chair, Representative Katiza-Wattoon, to move approval of those minutes.
Mr. Chair, so moved.
Thank you for that motion. To confirm, a copy of the minutes is in the virtual meeting packet. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? I'll give just a minute. And I'm hearing none, then all in favor of, oh, there's a Representative Heinzman, okay. And then all in favor of approval of the April 28th minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes and the minutes from April 28th are adopted. So members, there are two bills on the calendar today for us. The first one is House File 4375. That's a bill of mine, and so I'm going to hand things over to Representative Katiza-Wattoon to chair this portion of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, our next item on the agenda is House File 4375. Chair Pinto, would you like to move your bill before the committee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that House File 4375 be recommended for placement on the General Register.
I understand you also have a DE1 amendment to get the bill in the shape that you would like us to hear it. And would you like to move the amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair, I move the DE1 amendment. I should note, just to confirm for members, that this is an amendment that will, as the chair said, place the bill in the form that I wish. Well, I guess I can describe things as we go. This DE1 amendment contains some proposals from the Department of Education, which I can walk through, and then also it contains a proposal relating to a deadline for relating to parent aware as well. I'll turn things back to you, Madam Chair.
Very good. So Chair Pinto has moved the DE1 amendment, and first we will have any further description of the DE1 amendment from Chair Pinto, and then we will take public testimony. Following testimony, we will have two amendments submitted for consideration by members of the committee. We will take up each amendment, and then we will have a final vote on the bill. Chair Pinto, please go forward and describe the DE1 amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I should note there is some noise on our call. I'm not sure if there's someone who maybe needs to mute, who's not muted right now, maybe being outdoors or walking or something. Oh, that sound has gone away, Madam Chair. So perhaps that got dealt with. So members, the DE1 amendment, I'll just walk through the sections real briefly. Section 1 aligns with federal guidance stating that a school district cannot require a birth certificate to enroll in a public school. And this allows for a variety of means of that verification of age for enrollment, including a passport, et cetera. Section 2 establishes a developmentally appropriate timeline for screening for early learning scholarship recipients who receive a scholarship before turning age 3, basically just clarifying and ensuring that the developmental screening happens at age 3 rather than if for those children receiving scholarships at a younger age. Section 3 extends the deadline by which early childhood programs must have a 3 or 4 star parent aware rating to accept early learner scholarships. The deadline currently is July 1st, 2020, and instead it extends that to a time when 40% of programs eligible to receive parent aware rating have in fact received a rating. I know that we have 2 amendments relating to that, so we'll, I'm sure, get to discuss that. The second part of Section 3 is to strike some obsolete language. And Section 4 adds tribal nations to interagency early intervention committees. And as I say, several of these come from Department of Education. And so that's it regarding the description of the D amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, do we have any further clarifying questions for Chair Pinto before we move on to public testimony today? I'm just going to take a peek here and make sure I don't miss anyone. Oh, Representative Heinzman, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If Representative Pinto could explain the provision that is making a change on the birth certificate requirement, I can think of a number of scenarios where that raises some significant red flags for me. Are there any protections built into the language there, Representative Pinto, that would protect, let's say, children who are in situations where there's a conflict between parents? And this is actually one of the most common, according to my law enforcement friends, one of the most common causes or situations where children are quote unquote abducted and moved to another part of the country, would be a conflict between separating parents, and documentation like a birth certificate may or may not be present. Are there protections built in to keep kids from being used in those situations? We'll just put it that way.
Chair Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Heitzman. I actually would like to ask staff if we can. This proposal came from the Department of Education, and I know that I believe anyway that there is an MD staff member who is available to answer questions. And so if, at least in the first instance, I'll see if the department can help answer your question, then I can certainly jump in as well. But this did come from the department. And I see Mr. Uni on as well.
Mr. Uni.
Madam Chair, thank you, and committee members. Representative, thank you so much for the question. The purpose of this provision is to align with federal expectations through guidance that a family does not have to, cannot be required to present their birth certificate to prove the child's age, that there are various other methods of documentation that a family can provide the school to show that the child's age is in fact their age. And so this could be anything from the birth certificate, but it could also be a passport, other forms of hospital birth records, a baptismal certificate, adoption or other legal documents, health records, immunization records, immigration records, previously verified school records from another district that they may have come from. So this is really just aligning with federal expectations. This was put out in a joint memo with the U.S. Department of Justice, their Civil Rights Division, and the U.S. Department of Education.
Representative Heitzman, any further clarification?
I was specifically asking if there was any provisions there that would trigger law enforcement or protect a kid in a situation where there's been an abduction, and I'm thinking a birth certificate might be one of those triggers. If one is missing, that would maybe raise a red flag. I'm trying to imagine a number of different scenarios where a birth certificate could actually be a protection for a child, and I'm wondering if those protections are in place, so that would maybe it's causing some heartburn for me, and maybe it's could be providing some creating some difficulties for others. And I just want to make sure that by eliminating this requirement, we're not creating a whole nother set of problems. Are there? I'm sure there's a count, and maybe the agency could tell us if what is there. I mean, has every other state in the country worked with the federal government to remove this requirement? Where are we on that list?
Mr. Uni.
Madam Chair, Representative, I don't have that comparison with where other states are. I'd be happy to go back and work with staff to try to get the committee that information. But what I do know that, again, this is in line with the expectations from multiple federal agencies just around providing the age verification. So I have not consulted with DPS or other law enforcement agencies on the implications around this provision, but I'd be happy to go back and take a look and get the information for the committee.
Madam Chair, I would suggest that if we have no idea if there's another state that is in compliance with this requirement, and we have no idea what the other information is from the agency, I don't understand why we're moving this into a bill during a worldwide pandemic as a priority. It sounds like we're running a little blind here. I don't know if there's more information that can be provided before this bill is put on the floor, but I believe the motion was that this floor would go to the general register.
Chair Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Heisman, thank you for raising these concerns. And as you and I know from interacting in some other ways when we're up in Brainerd, I work as a prosecutor, as you know, relating to exploitation of kids, tends to be more at the teenage level than younger kids. And I guess I think that I'll be interested in talking with you, maybe learning more about the law enforcement folks that you've spoken with about this, because it seems to me that the issue of verification of age for enrolling a kid in school feels to me like kind of a separate issue from the abduction or parental disagreement issue you're talking about. Because I mean, you certainly could have a situation where the parent, takes the kid and the birth certificate on the one hand, or on the other hand, I mean, it seems like what we want to do is have a situation where a kid, we can get the age verified. Again, this is separate from federal compliance. Be able to verify a kid's age and have multiple ways of doing so, and make sure that a child is in school. And that's kind of a separate issue from the issue of parental disputes, missing children, et cetera, which is a whole, obviously, an extremely important point. But I guess I would feel like this is separate from that. And I guess what I'd urge is, it's true this is being recommended for placement in the general register. You raise an important point, and I guess what I'd urge is that we would continue to move this along. But I will commit to you to continue the conversation with the department and with you, and make sure that if this were to come up, that we'd make sure to understand much better the point that you're raising. So I do feel like it's kind of a somewhat separate issue than this issue of age verification. That's my thinking anyway.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, follow up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Pinto, this is your amendment, and the agency has no idea how many other states have moved this issue forward, and that it's, I guess, quote unquote, a requirement to the federal government that this provision, or a expectation of the federal government, at the very least, that this provision be included in state statute. But I don't hear any real information to back that up. I'm hearing that maybe at a later date. I mean, I'm sorry, but this doesn't pass the smell test. I don't understand why there isn't a better accounting of why this is necessary, and where and how this is being implemented in other states.
Chair Pinto, any response?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I don't know if Mr. Rooney has had any further thoughts about kind of. I guess I feel like this. it seems like this is a really helpful thing, sort of regardless of what's going on with other states. So certainly the federal compliance piece is important, but Mr. Rooney, I'm not sure if he has anything else to add regarding this. And I do believe it, just to say that this provision has been heard in education policy separately, because you'll notice that it does cover not just pre-K and preschool, but older ages as well, older grades. And I don't believe that this concern has been raised in those previous committees, which doesn't make it illegitimate, but just to recognize there has been a lot of scrutiny in that way. I'm not sure if Mr. Rooney has anything to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Uno, do you have any follow-up?
Yeah, Madam Chair and representatives, I just simply don't have the scan of what's happening in other states on hand. I'd be happy to go back and talk with staff to have that information provided to the committee. I simply this question has not been brought to my attention before, but that's not to say that staff doesn't have that information on hand. I'd be happy to go back and get that taken care of today.
Thank you, Mr. Oni. If you could pass on that information to the committee, I think that would be very helpful. As a note, I think that in general, Minnesota prides itself on being a leader in a variety of different areas. And so if this is one that we're taking the first steps to comply with the federal government's requirements, I think that in general, that's a good thing.
Madam Chair, with all due respect, just because we may or may not be the first state in the entire country to move a provision or a statute forward, that doesn't make it correct or right. It should be fully vetted. And at this time, Mr. Uni is indicating that there isn't any information to verify or to answer any of my questions. So I don't think that's an argument that really has any merit in this situation. We're just asking for some details. How is this issue being handled? If it's a federal compliance issue, we should be able to find out how that impact has been mitigated in other states and how it's been handled in other states. So to the bill author, Representative Pinto, I can't support this without knowing what this provision actually does and what the impacts could be. I think it would make sense that we'd have the information before it goes straight to the House floor. That's my concern, and I can't support the provision.
Representative Heinzman, thank you for escalating that. And I think Mr. Uni is willing to get us additional information that he just doesn't happen to have on hand today. Chair Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess, Representative Heinzman, what I'd urge, and I recognize you may or may not end up supporting it, but I guess what I'd urge you to do is just, if we just look at the merits of it, paragraph A is simply saying, paragraph B is simply saying that a district or charter school can't deny a child enrollment solely because a birth certificate is not in hand. And I would think we'd want to say, if you've got a child that lives in a given community and there's not a birth certificate, we still want that child enrolled. So B should make sense. And then A says that some of the ways that you can verify age are, and then they're listed. And we would want those things to be available for verifying age. So I would just say, just setting aside anything else, just on the merits, this seems to me to be a very good addition to Minnesota law, simply looking at the merits of these lines. So I'll leave it at that, but just separate from anything else, but happy to continue the conversation regardless of what happens with this. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Heinzman, for escalating your concerns. Members, any other further questions before we move on to public testimony? Seeing no other hands raised, we will now move on to public testimony. Testifiers, when I call your name, please unmute yourself, state your name and your affiliation, and proceed with your comments. Please remember to limit your comments to 2 minutes at the most. We have first up Cisa Keller with Think Small. Cisa, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Cisa Keller. I'm the Senior Vice President of Quality Development at Think Small. Think Small is a nonprofit organization with the mission of advancing quality care and education of children in their crucial early years. We do this by preparing early childhood educators to meet the needs of children they serve, by supporting parents in finding and paying for childcare, and finally by catalyzing change. I'm here today on behalf of the Early Childhood Crisis Work Group, a broad group of Minnesota organizations that came together in the fall of 2018 to address 2 crises impacting the state's youngest children: achievement gaps and a childcare shortage. We concluded that these two crises are intertwined and therefore must be addressed together to prevent creating unintended negative consequences. In a final report issued in late 2018, we described specific public policy recommendations to address both of these crises. Then came the COVID-19 pandemic, a third crisis that has greatly aggravated both the achievement gap and the childcare shortage crisis. The pandemic and the economic crisis that accompanied it has made the childcare shortage much worse. A disturbing recent survey by the National Association for the Education of Young Children found that 55% of childcare programs in Minnesota report that they could not survive a closure of more than 2 weeks without public assistance. Programs that closed during the pandemic may not reopen, which leaves even fewer early childhood education opportunities for families when they seek to return to work, further throttling families' financial situations and Minnesota's economic recovery. Likewise, Minnesota's worst in the nation achievement gaps are likely to be made worse as a result of the pandemic because more Minnesota children are likely to fall into poverty or deeper into poverty, which puts them at higher risk of falling behind. In short, childcare providers need more consumers in order to survive, and consumers need more quality providers to meet their families' needs, including support of their child's development. Therefore, we need to address this challenge from both the demand and supply side of the equation. And so today, I'm here on behalf of the Crisis Work Group in support of the DE1 amendment to House File 4375 that extends the period of time in which childcare providers who have earned a Parent-Aware 1 or 2-star rating continue to be eligible to serve children who have been awarded an early learning scholarship. This provision is one step in addressing Minnesota's pre-pandemic crisis of a severe childcare shortage and some of the nation's worst achievement gaps, as well as the post-pandemic crisis, the threat of a near mass childcare closing at a time when workers in the critical sector desperately need childcare. I'd also like to take a moment to provide some concerns we have about the two other amendments. First, the A2 amendment regarding the 40% threshold. We feel that it is important to have a statewide policy as it is too administratively complex and too confusing for parents and providers to set up a state county by county eligibility for programs that serve children with early learning scholarships. In addition, we opposed allowing all programs eligible for the rate differential to serve scholarship children as proposed in the A3 amendment. By using the Parent-Aware ratings, we are relying on a multi-dimensional marker of quality rather than only focusing on staff training. In summary, the Crisis Work Group supports the DE1 amendment that extends this period of time in which providers who have earned a 1 or 2-star rating are eligible to serve early learning scholarships. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Keller, for your testimony. Next on the list, we have Cindy Cunningham, the Minnesota Child Care Provider Information Network. Ms. Cunningham, you have the floor. If you would unmute yourself, say your name. And
Madam Chair, and for everyone for allowing this kind of a process to go through. It makes it much easier to testify. I am Cindy Cunningham. I've been a licensed family child care provider for over 24 years, and I am the public policy chairperson for MCPEN, which is the 501c3 statewide association. You might hear a little voice going because I am providing care for a couple children. Personally, I am also a 3-star rated program, and I have a teaching degree from the University of Northern Iowa. I am testifying on behalf of MCPEN in support of the amendment. Specifically, we support the section of the amendment lines 3.6 to 3.7, which establishes participation threshold of 40% of all programs eligible to participate before the 3- and 4-star shift. This 3- and 4-star shift, I believe we have done at least 3 times on a 2-year basis. And ultimately we end up at this point, which is the capacity and to be able to serve families is not high enough. And by placing it in 40%, that will put it on a different calendar process. Without the proposed change in law, parents will be needing to find different care settings for their children or not use their early learner scholarships. Passing the 40% threshold and extending the timeframe past July is urgently needed. 2 major positive aspects to this, to these lines. It extends utilization of early learner scholarships at all programs past July. This allows parents and providers to provide the most critical impact on a child's success, and that is the continuity of care. In this emergency peacetime crisis, nothing is more important than that continuity of care. The change also allows licensed family child care more time for the opportunity to step into the Parent-Aware system and become rated. The system has actually been counterproductive in the perspective that grants and such that the 4-star were just now recently offered. So the motivation actually was more as a small business and income to be rating at a lower process. So the motivation has not been there from a financial standpoint to rate at a higher level. 40% eligible programs participating gives a measurable criteria to determine when there's a potential of available care prior to narrowing down to the 3 and 4 rated programs. The 40% threshold will support the mixed delivery, which is vital to Minnesota's model. I do have a couple of comments about the amendments. Do you want those now or at a later time, Madam Chair?
You feel free to comment now, and then we'll move forward.
Okay, thank you. So regarding the amendments, I just saw them just a short while ago, but my perspective, our perspective would be that functioning or evaluating parent-aware standards and the criteria has not been at a county level before. And even though this might be worth looking at, there's not a time to look at the depth of the impact with that and setting up essentially a new criteria system for that. We would be not in support of that. If that needs to be looked at again at a later time post-crisis, that would be worth that discussion. And regarding the anyone regarding accepting the scholarships as far as, for the rate differential, I have a BA degree in teaching. It is imperative that I be able to go through the Parent Aware program to be able to provide that level of quality care to children. Accredited programs have a fast track to do it, but it actually gives a unified evaluative point of criteria, specifically things like the CDA that can get some differential is extremely valuable for the provider and for the families. But again, a CDA does not, like my BA degree, does not give the broad scope of evaluation such as within the Parent Aware program. So thank you for your time and efforts, and I hope that this 40% can be passed through. It's critical because of July and parents needing care, finding care, and providing care to interview, to do any of those kinds of things at this point in time is almost an impossible task. So thank you again for your time and efforts.
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham, for your words and for your work. Members, do we have any questions for our testifiers before we move on to amendments? Seeing no hands raised, we have 2 amendments today. We have the A2 amendment submitted by a committee member. Who would like to offer and move the A2 amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Damath, and I would like to move the A2 amendment.
Representative Damath is moving the A2 amendment. Representative Damath, please briefly describe that amendment for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The A2 amendment to House File 4375 would apply the 40% of the rated provider threshold to participate in the Parent Aware rating program to be 40% by county and apply only to the providers in that county. When the Parent Aware rating system was started, half of the counties in the state got a 1-year head start to participate in the program. This is why we are considering changing the arbitrary deadline for the 3 and 4-star rating requirement, because it's not fair to the providers who were able to enter the rating system a year behind some of their peers, and in some cases, their competitors. Some of these counties that were given a 1-year head start are right next to counties that had to wait a year and have municipalities right on the county line. Even with the 40% threshold, some providers remain at a geographic disadvantage when another provider just a few blocks away is in a county with a 1-year head start. This amendment is a reasonable effort to find a compromise respecting the goal of time of limiting early learning scholarships to highly rated programs while recognizing that this goal must be achieved with a measure of fairness. And that is my amendment, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Damath. Members, do we have any discussion to Representative Damath's A2 amendment? Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I think that Ms. Keller and Ms. Cunningham described this well, and for the reasons that they described and others, I would respectfully urge a no vote.
Right. Seeing no further questions from members. Representative Damath renews her motion that the A2 amendment be added to our DE1 amendments. Are there any further questions on that motion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Representative Pinto, Chair.
No.
Representative Katiza-Wattoon, Vice Chair.
No.
Representative Franson. Representative Bonner.
No.
Representative Damath.
Aye.
Representative Heinzman.
Aye.
Representative Morrison.
No.
Representative Pryor.
No.
Representative Wozniak.
No.
Representative West.
Aye.
Representative Franson.
Yes. Yes.
I hear you. Thank you. There are 4 ayes and 6 nays.
There being 6 ayes and 4 nays, the motion fails and the A2 amendment is not adopted. Wait, sorry, there being 4 ayes and 6 nays, the motion fails and the A2 amendment is not adopted. Thank you for the signaling there. I apologize. Moving on to the A3 amendment. We have an A3 amendment submitted by a committee member who would like to offer and move the A3 amendment today. Sure, if everyone's off mute that needs to be there. Representative Franson.
We're having some problems over here today. I cannot find my raise hand symbol this morning, so.
Not a problem. You'd like to offer the A3?
Yep. Can I do that now?
Very good.
So the A3 amendment allows providers meeting the provider rate differential for accreditation under 119B .13 subdivision 3A to also participate in the early learning scholarship program without participating in the Parents Aware rating system. Section 119B .13 subdivision 3A provides a 15% CCAP rate reimbursement bump or differential to providers with certain accreditations. For family child care providers, this includes holding a child development associate degree, child development associate credential, a technical college diploma in child development, or a bachelor's degree in early childhood education. For a child care center, this includes very specific standards for accreditations. This 15% rate differential is the same differential earned by a provider holding a 3-star Parent Aware rating, which logically indicates that we are already considering, or we already consider holding certain credentials or accreditations is equivalent to holding a 3-star rating, and thus we should treat them fairly. And Madam Chair, that is my amendment.
Thank you, Representative Franson. Members, any discussion? Chair Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I think that Ms. Keller and Ms. Cunningham did a good job describing the concerns with this. And so with respect, I would recommend a no vote.
Representative Franson renews her motion that the A3 amendment be adopted. Do we have any questions on that motion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment.
Before I take the roll, I see Representative Heinzman does have his hand raised.
Thank you. Sorry, I missed you, Representative Heinzman.
No, that's no problem. I just was trying to remember back specifically to what the testifiers may or may not have taken issue with this particular amendment, and I was wondering if Representative Pinto could remind us.
Chair Pinto, go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Heinzman. So the concern, Representative Heinzman, is that the provider rate differential for accreditation is really focused on one particular measure of quality, which is staff training in one particular piece. And of course, Minnesota's approach is much more multidimensional. It is, and I do want to note how important it is that we delay this July 1st date. I feel like we sort of maybe have missed the forest for the trees here a little bit, that if we don't push a change through, then effective July 1st, programs will not be eligible, childcare providers will not be eligible for scholarships unless they have a 3 or 4 star rating. So what we're trying to do is to push that off. But the concern is that in pushing that off, we do want to make sure that we are moving in the direction of having this multidimensional quality. Even as you know, for many of us, we want to make sure that parent aware is carefully evaluated. That's an important component of House File 1, which moved through this committee, et cetera. But anyway, so bottom line regarding this amendment, though, is that accreditation is just is a measure that is simply too narrow, and we need to be aiming bigger and broader. And that's what I heard in the remarks from both the testifiers, who are both a provider and then also a organization that works with providers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Heinzman, any follow-up?
That is, I guess I would just say that isn't necessarily exactly what I heard from the testifiers, but I understand that that's Chair Pinto's position, and I think that we should proceed with the vote.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further hands, the clerk will take the roll on the A3 amendment.
Representative Pinto, Chair.
No.
Representative Katiza-Wattoon, Vice Chair.
No.
Representative Franson.
Yes.
Representative Bonner.
No.
Representative Demuth.
Yes.
Representative Heinzman.
Yes.
Representative Morrison.
No.
Representative Pryor.
No.
Representative Wozniak.
No.
Representative West.
Aye.
There are 4 ayes and 6 nays.
There being 4 ayes and 6 nays, the motion fails and the A3 amendment is not adopted. You got the numbers right that time. Members, do we have any further discussion on this bill? All right. Seeing none, Chair Pinto, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
No, thank you, Madam Chair and members. And again, it's especially important that we delay this July 1st date. And so, and certainly eager to continue working with members on precisely how we do that. But it is really important that we get that done. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. So Chair Pinto renews his motion that the DE1 amendment be adopted. Are there any further questions on that motion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the DE1 amendment.
Representative Pinto, Chair.
Aye.
Representative Katiza-Wattoon, Vice Chair.
Aye.
Representative Franson.
Yes.
Representative Bonner.
Aye.
Representative Demuth.
Aye.
Representative Heinzman.
No.
Representative Morrison.
Yes.
Representative Pryor.
Aye.
Representative Wozniak.
Aye.
Representative West.
Aye.
There are 9 ayes and 1 nay.
There being 9 ayes and 1 nay, the motion prevails and the DE1 amendment is not adopted. Adopted. It is adopted. Members, we will now move on to the vote, the final vote on our bill. Chair Pinto, you renew your motion that House File 4375 as amended be recommended for placement on the general register. Do we have any questions on that motion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill.
Representative Pinto, Chair.
Aye.
Representative Katiza-Wattoon, Vice Chair.
Aye.
Representative Franson,
Aye.
Representative Bonner,
Aye.
Representative Dameth,
Aye.
Representative Heinzman,
Aye.
Representative Morrison,
Aye.
Representative Pryor,
Aye.
Representative Wozniak,
Aye.
Representative West.
Aye.
There are 10 ayes and no nays.
There being 10 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails and House File 4375 as amended is recommended for placement on the General Register. Chair Pinto, you are on your way. And with that, I will pass the virtual gavel back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. So members, our next bill on the calendar, on the agenda, pardon me, is House File 1785, a bill of Representative Richardson's. You'll recall we had a hearing on this bill last year, and since then, Representative Richardson has continued to work with stakeholders and does have a DE amendment to present today, and I know there's a couple of other amendments as well. So first, I'm going to ask Representative Katiza-Wattoon to move that House File 1785 be placed on the General Register.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Katiza-Wattoon. And then Representative Richardson has a DE2 author's amendment to get the bill in the shape she'd like to hear it. And Representative Katiza-Wattoon, could you please move the DE2 amendment to place that before the committee?
Certainly, I move the DE2 amendment before the committee.
Thank you, Representative Katiza-Wattoon. So members, first we're going to have Representative Richardson describe the DE2 amendment and take public testimony. And then after that, we'll do the two amendments that have been submitted and take them up and take votes on the bill. Representative Richardson, we're going to have you up. If you can please describe the DE2 amendment.
Thank
And
you,
welcome
Chair
to you.
Pinto. Thank you. So the DE2 amendment is would actually create an end to preschool suspension, and it would allow for expulsions to continue in the instance of if there are ongoing safety concerns for kids. But in order to get there, it would require that there be support for the children to ensure that they could get access to services and only using that as a last resort.
Thank you, Representative Richardson. And so with that, I think we're going to be moving to your testifiers, unless folks have clarifying questions, but I think I'm inclined to maybe save those for later. So let's first have our testifiers. We're going to have Ms. Holden go first. And if you can please, each testifier, you'll need to unmute yourself, state your name, identify yourself for the record, and then proceed with your comments. If you can keep them quite brief for time purposes, 1 to 2 minutes, that'd be great. So Ms. Holden, we'll start with you.
Thank you very much, Chair Pinto. Chair Pinto and members, my name is Maren Holden, and I'm an attorney with Legal Aid, which includes the Minnesota Disability Law Center. We're also part of the Solutions Not Suspensions Coalition. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today on this important issue. School and preschool in particular is a really crucial way that kids learn healthy behavior habits. Really young learners often present with really challenging behaviors as part of their typical development. For them, really disruptive behaviors on paper can often be a reflection that they just don't have the skills to handle what they're going through. They might want something and not know how to express it. They're experiencing big new emotions and don't have tools to help process them. So kids presenting with really significant behaviors need support to build and strengthen the tools that they have to handle stress and other challenges. And suspending and expelling children actually does the opposite. It takes away from them the structured environment that is the likely thing that will help them to build the tools that they need to have healthy behavior habits. So this bill would bring Minnesota's laws in line with well-established research on child development by narrowing the circumstances under which a preschool program could dismiss a young child. Like Representative Richardson said, it prohibits dismissals, but it does permit expulsions and exclusions in really limited circumstances. I think this is a good solution because it sets that baseline that dismissals are not how schools would deal with behaviors from young children, but does set out a reasonable path for when there are significant ongoing safety issues. So in subdivision 2, asking that the program help to try to connect the child with needed support, like collaborating with family or mental health providers, creating a plan, a referral for needed support services, or a referral for special education services. And then if those things don't work, the school really can end the child's enrollment via an expulsion or exclusion using the procedures in the Pupil Fair Dismissal Act. Just one quick note about the A3 while I'm here is that I do worry about allowing expulsions and exclusions for under the violent behavior toward other people. I think that violent behavior can be construed really broadly. Like my 3-year-old hit my 1-year-old repeatedly yesterday, and it was because he was frustrated and didn't know how to say it. What I like about the current language is that it connects the kids who are struggling with behavior with supports first. And so I think one thought I had about the A3 is that if that violent behavior piece, maybe it could be added as a basis, but to still require that the subdivision 2 pieces be exhausted first. So I think that's the real crux of this bill, is trying to connect kids with supports before taking them out of structured environments. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify, and I hope that you will support this.
Thank you, Ms. Holden. And then our next testifier is Ms. Webster.
Thank you, Chair Pinto, and thank you to the committee for your time today. I just wanted to share a little about our support of the amendment. My name is Wendy Webster. I serve as the Director of Community Education and Communications for St. Anthony Martin School District, where we serve about 95 3-, 4-, and 5-year-old preschoolers. And first want to thank Representative Richardson. I had a chance to meet with Representative Richardson on behalf of the Minnesota Community Education Association about a year ago. And one of the things that I learned is that we share a goal of ensuring that our children of color and children with disabilities are not systemically dismissed from our pre-K programs. And so I just want to thank her for her advocacy. Along this journey, we've also had a chance to meet with staff at MDE, and most recently met with Ms. Holden with solutions, not suspensions. And again, we all shared a goal in terms of how do we ensure children are successful in our preschool programs, while at the same time recognizing that behaviors are at times a way in which kids are communicating what their needs are to staff, and how we can make adjustments in our programs to help ensure all children are successful. I too agree that when I read through the A2 amendment, to me, it seems like the last resort that we've been talking about. We want to make sure that we have followed every step possible before we look at possibly expelling a child from preschool. And that is never our intention. Our intention is always to continue to change the adult behaviors in our program to help all children be successful. And two, I agree with Ms. Holden's responses in A3 as well, as again, if we look at behaviors, communication, and how might we need to change our environment to help children be successful. So just wanted to thank Representative Richardson, MDE, and Ms. Holden for our partnership and our work together. I think with these amendments, we have gotten this language to a place that will help all children be successful.
Thank you, Ms. Webster. And next, Ms. Mitchell, if you're on the line.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Shannon Mitchell, and I'm the Managing Director of External Affairs for Educators for Excellence, a teacher-led group that seeks to improve policies by elevating teacher voice. I'm also a former teacher. Ending exclusionary discipline and using alternative methods is an issue our members prioritize every year. When we've brought pre-K teachers and elementary educators together to talk about improving discipline in school climate, what sticks out to me is the variation in the use of suspensions in pre-K and early grades. So some teachers will say, wow, like my school has never suspended a pre-K student. That's not a practice we use. And others say it happens frequently and it's not improving the behavior of the students. And this variation exists within the same school districts. This shows that we can and must do better. And this bill, I think, will only be felt by schools that, quite frankly, need to be pushed to do better. One educator member that was unable to testify today would like to share her experience very briefly. So I will read that. In my career working at different schools, I've seen students, especially those of color, sent out of the room too frequently. And I've also seen positive things such as solid relationship building between adults and students. One student that comes to mind still was suspended for acting out towards other students and adults when redirecting challenging behaviors he was exhibiting. At that time, the child was only 4 years old. When he returned to school after the suspension, his behavior did not improve, and in fact, it regressed. he didn't need to be pushed out, but he did need more services. I believe there's a lot that adults can do, including relationship building to keep kids in the classroom. But in some cases, kids do need more in the way of support, such as mental health or additional academic interventions. Whatever the case, suspending our little ones is ineffective and harmful. And this was a pre-K educator. In closing, I would just ask, as both parties continue to work on strengthening early learning options to address the opportunity gap, and wisely so, it's egregious to neglect addressing who has access to these opportunities that we're expanding. And so we must remove the barriers, and House File 1785 does just that. And just want to thank Representative Richardson for bringing it forward and the committee for hearing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. And I'll note there was a parent who was hoping to join us and is not able to. She submitted written statement that's in your packets. Members of the public posted online, along with, I know, a number of other documents as well, letters and statements regarding the bill. Members, I'm inclined to move directly to amendments. If there are specific questions or comments, I suppose questions for the testifiers or about the bill that the folks feel the need to address before the amendments, we can do that. I'll pause for just a second, but I'm thinking the most effective thing is just to go straight to the amendments, talk those through, and then we can have work on that from there. So I'm not aware of anybody raising their hands about anything we need to address before the amendments. So why don't we go directly? So we've got the A2 amendment, and so who wishes to claim or offer that, if anyone does? And we'll kind of look for
Representative Dameth. And I
would Representative Dameth, please. Representative Dameth, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the A2 amendment to House File 1785.
Thank you. And actually, I think it's the A2 amendment to probably the DE2 amendment to House File 1785. Okay, good. That has been moved. And so Representative Dameth, please briefly describe your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment would exempt fee-based programs from the limitations of the bill. We hear about the loss of learning time for students who are excluded from class or their regular educational setting, but we also have to consider the loss of learning time for the other students who are following the rules, those who instruction or activities are put on hold, while the educators or staff direct their attention to a misbehaving or disruptive child. Parents who pay a fee for preschool or early learning also deserve to see their child receiving the full benefits of the program. Mr. Chair, I ask that we carefully consider all students. And with that, I withdraw this amendment.
Okay, the amendment is withdrawn. Thank you, Representative Dameth. And so with that, we then have the A3 amendment. And does anyone wish to offer the A3 amendment? I'll look
Mr.
for,
Chair.
yes, Representative West, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The A3 amendment allows.
Hold on a second, Representative West. We need to have you. That's okay. So I think you're moving the A3 amendment to the DE2 amendment, House File 1785. And so we'll assume that I assume that is your motion.
That is my motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, no problem. Then please continue describing the amendment.
So this amendment, which has briefly been touched on, allows for dismissal of pupils engaging in violent behavior. And this comes from, I met with several teachers and a school psychologist from Anoka Hennepin District. And well, we spent a lot of time talking about school funding. The next thing we talked about was violence in the schools. And the stories I heard from those teachers were, I couldn't believe it. And teachers have an incredibly tough job. So nobody wants to expel or dismiss children. And I mean, especially preschoolers, it's no teacher wants to do that. But not allowing them to do that in cases of violent behavior, I have a lot of concerns with, because a teacher, I still trust the teacher is not going to willy-nilly throw out suspension when the kid's not really causing a real problem. But if a kid's going at somebody with scissors, or, you know, even a 4-year-old can cause a lot of damage, especially when you don't see it coming. And I think we want to make sure we're taking care of all the students in the classroom. And sometimes that might be removing a student for a short period of time, rather than going through a giant process. So I think an exemption for violent students is legitimate in this case. And then all other cases, we can go through the process in Representative Richardson's bill, which is the direction we want to move. We don't want to expel preschoolers, but that is my amendment, and I ask for your support.
Thank you, Representative West. So we're going to go to the bill's author, Representative Richardson, for her comment on the amendment. And I believe there's at least one question. So we're going to get to, so Representative Katiz-Wiltun will get to you, but Representative Richardson will have you first comment on the amendment, then we'll go to the question. Representative Richardson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the way that this is currently drafted, it would no longer ensure that students are receiving access to supports or resources before being expelled, which would be a concern. Again, I think everyone agrees that expulsion should be something that is of a last resort. And we also want to ensure that we are working to meet the kids' needs as well. And so with the way this is currently written, it would take away the ability to ensure that we are first trying to support before expelling. And I would just also remind the committee as well, as it relates to removal from the classroom, this bill doesn't change any of the obligations or tools that exist under removal from the classroom space. It's only in regards to thinking about suspensions and expulsions. So I would ask for a no vote on this, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Richardson. And Representative West, of course, before we're done, we'll let you get the last word. Representative Katiz-Wiltun has a question or comment. Representative Katiz-Wiltun.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Richardson, for all your ongoing work on this bill. So for me, maintaining the safety of each of our students in our schools is of utmost importance to me, no matter their age. And I know that we've had continued dialogue between all stakeholders. I appreciate the testimony from members of the public today to ensure that the solution included and presented in today's DE2 amendment is workable from all sides. And I think that when we consider this DE already includes an exemption for serious ongoing safety threats, that's a stronger standard of practice that not only protects all children and staff in the classroom, but also ensures that a child is not removed from their educational environment for age-appropriate behavior that could be considered violent, something that we know occurs in more frequency with our students of color. So with that in mind, members, I will be voting no on this amendment.
Anyone else have questions or comments before we go to the author of the amendment? Just checking to see and actually give folks a minute here.
Bonner, I believe.
Representative Bonner, perhaps you're thinking Representative West. Representative Bonner, do you? Oh, maybe not. Oh, yes, perhaps. Okay, there you go, Representative Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to say I want to thank Representative Richardson for all the hard work that she's done. She has done a tremendous amount of work with stakeholders to really come to a really good standard of practice here and work it forward. The one other piece I'd like to say is, I heard from this speaker about a year ago, and he was incredible, and I'm sorry I cannot recall his name, but one of the key nuggets that he had was this idea that we treat every child as sort of a diamond in the rough. And if you've met any 3-year-olds, it is abundantly clear that is true for all 3-year-olds, right? And as my mother used to say, she had this phrase because she said, well, children, especially at that age, it is their job to test us. They are testing the boundaries, they are testing our reactions, and they're forming the basis of how they're going to see the world, how they're going to react to the world. And she used to say to us, that's why you are the little person and I am the big person, right? And how we as educators, as parents, react to those children and how we give them reinforcement or redirect their energy at that age is really incredible. I can tell you that my nephews and nieces are 5, 4, and 3. And there are days where they test us all. But knowing that, I think that this is a really great concept here, in that we want to make sure that this isn't just about kids acting out and not using their words appropriately, that this is about finding ways to redirect that energy and that enthusiasm and really truly see the diamond in the rough of each of these individuals. And I can tell you, I work very closely with an early childhood educator who has in fact, inherited many children who have been suspended in other programs and ended up in hers. And she has told me without question that some of the trauma that these children have experienced has been tremendous. And she has had to spend a great deal of time working to sort of refocus and help those children get back to a place where they feel loved and appreciated and good, and that they can be good citizens in her class, that they feel supported. And I know that that is really, really important. So it's vital that we as educators and parents and support folks, that we are doing everything we can to make sure we're putting those kiddos on the right path. So I want to say thank you to Representative Richardson for this bill and for really doing the groundwork to get it where it is today. Thank you so much for all of your work.
Thank you, Representative Bonner. And I'll be calling on Representative Heinzman. And just to say that after that will be Representatives Franson and Wozlowick are on the list. So Representative Heinzman, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just speaking to the A3 that Representative West is offering, I too have had a number of conversations with teachers as I've had opportunity to visit their classrooms and talk to them about issues that they are having to deal with on sometimes a daily basis in their classrooms. And I hope that the public is watching today as the DFL is about to vote down an amendment that allows for the dismissal of a pupil engaging in violent behavior towards staff or other pupils. A lot of you know on this, I'm closely connected to a lot of homeschooling groups around the state, and that is a whole separate discussion, but it is interesting how many of those folks wound up deciding to make a decision for their child after their child was a victim of violence in a classroom. I don't know that public education or education systems in general are the best place to try and solve some of these problems. There may be cases where the violence reaches a level that a child needs to be pulled out of that situation for a period of time. And there may be other tools that this committee should be talking about that could be delivered, or programs that could be offered to help work on those behavioral issues outside of the classroom. But in the classroom, that teacher and that school district needs to have tools in place to protect students and to protect teachers too. I was physically there and watched a child bite a teacher, and no, there wasn't blood. Went through, but through the clothing, the bruise immediately began to rise on the teacher's body, and I was just totally shocked. And I hope once again that people are paying attention as my DFL friends are voting against, I'll repeat it, an amendment that allows for the dismissal of a pupil engaging in violent behavior towards staff and other kids.
And Representative Franson.
Point, but when there is a disruptive individual and there's no tools in the toolbox, and there is also a negative effect that happens to the other class students in the classroom with the loss of that instruction time, right? And as a parent who has 2 boys in the public school system as well, I would not be okay with a child that is disruptive. People know he's disruptive. They realize that he is prone to violent outbursts, and that there's no repercussions. I think that also sends a message to other children that they can be inappropriate, they can act out, and there's really no consequences to that behavior. And I really think that we should maybe slow this bill down or have some more discussion. I know this isn't just a state issue, it's a national conversation that is taking place. And we do have, there is a lack of respect these days with students to adults. And I think this bill says it's okay to be naughty in school, and there's gonna be no consequences for you, Mr. Chair. And I just think that's just not a good message to send.
Thank you, Representative Franson. And Representative Wozlowick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to remind folks, we're talking about 3- and 4-year-olds here. So these are we're not talking about high school students. We're not talking about middle school students. We're talking about the littlest learners that are in our programs. And I do want to say that as someone who's worked in a school-based childcare program and struggled with some of these issues as well, I certainly understand the impulse to want to say that any sort of violent behavior, and I would actually question what that means, because I know that I've seen students do things, nonverbal students in particular, that might be classified as violent behavior, and the reasons that they're participating in that behavior is because they don't know how to use their words to say what they're trying to say, particularly among 3- and 4-year-olds who may not have sort of the verbal skills that older students might have. And I just want to put that out there. I've seen this happen, and the best way that I've actually seen it resolved when we've had students, I've had older students in programs, 2nd and 3rd graders who have similar issues where they're not necessarily able to use their words in ways as other students are. And we actually followed the tools in the toolbox that are listed in this bill, where we actually consulted with the students' parents and a school psychologist and the teacher and some other folks, the OT and the PT specialist at the school. And we were able to figure out a way to keep the child in our program while providing some sort of ways for them to kind of use that energy in a more productive way. So things like fidget toys and having their own little quiet space where they could go if they feel like they're getting overwhelmed. And it actually ended up working out really well for the student. They received the services that they needed through the school, as well as the parents were very cooperative in terms of helping us figure out a way to make this work for the student. So I think I understand that impulse to want to say, no, you just get to leave, but I think that it actually can do more damage to students because it's taking them out of that environment where they are a structured environment. And it's doing so when they're kind of in those years when they really need to have that learning space. So I hear the concerns, but I really think it's important that we're providing these services to students. We don't know all of their background. We don't know where they're coming from. We don't know if they've had trauma that might be leading to some of these sort of responses we're seeing in the classroom. And I understand I've been hit, I've been kicked, I've had violent acts on me as a child care provider. But it's also having that conversation with the student, if they're able to have that conversation, and the parents and the other staff around. So why might this have happened? What are the issues the student is dealing with that we know? Or what are the sort of things that trigger that behavior? It could be a whole multitude of things. And I think really having a better understanding of where students are coming from and their background and what might be impacting their behavior is a really important piece to making sure that we're not only keeping students safe, the students themselves, but also students in the other students in the classroom, and also ensuring that we have a learning environment where these students can participate. So just want to throw that out there and say that I don't support the amendment. And I hope others.
Thank you, Representative Wozlowick. Given the extent of the debate and discussion, I'm going to go back to Representative Richardson in just a second as the bill's author, and then of course Representative West will end with you. But are there any other member questions or comments regarding the A3 amendment before I start that final sequence? Because I'm looking to see if we have anything. Let's give a second. Okay. And then, I'm sorry, Representative Morrison is up next. I'm missing some of my notes here. Representative Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Representative Richardson, so much for bringing this important bill and sticking with it. And I appreciate Representative Wozlowick sharing her personal experience in the child care setting. I want to reiterate her point that we're talking about preschoolers. We're talking about 3- and 4-year-old babies here. These are toddlers. We know that Black preschool students are suspended disproportionately. We also know that Minnesota has one of the worst, if not the worst, opportunity gap in the nation. And this is an opportunity for us to change policies that could really have an impact. The earlier kids get the intervention that they need, they have the structured environment that they need, the better. This might be a small piece of trying to get at that solution, but it's absolutely a piece of it. So I just want to thank Representative Richardson, and I will proudly be supporting it.
Thank you, Representative Morrison. So I'm going to go back to Representative Franson, I think is going to sort of start our closing comments here, and then we'll let Representative Richardson, and then Representative Richardson, and then we'll go to Representative West. So Representative Franson will kind of trade off. So Representative Franson, we'll start with you.
Oh, sure. Thank you. And it is a joy to see each and every one of you. I actually do terribly miss our in-person committee hearings. I'm just more of a people person, so I'm still trying to get used to this virtual world here. Mr. Chair and members, I do believe that the bill is well intended. Ms. Richardson's, I know you've been working on this bill really a long time, and I applaud you for that, and that the goal is laudable. But I believe that more thought must be given to the unintended consequences, and that more work needs to be done on this bill, and the minority members are willing to help in that process if you are willing to accept some of that constructive feedback.
Thank you, Representative Franson, and I think those comments were intended both for this amendment, but also for the bill as a whole, I think. And so my apologies if I sort of had a brush on that, but well, we can definitely get back to it too. So Representative Richardson, we'll turn to you then on the A3 amendment.
Thank you, Chair Pinto. I think it's important to remember that we're not talking about no consequences. What we're actually asking for is compassionate accountability. The ability to be able to understand that many of the kids that are exhibiting behaviors have experienced trauma. They may have high ACE scores. There may be things that are going on in the environment that can contribute. And oftentimes at that age, developmentally, kids are not in the best position to be able to articulate what's going on with them. Because again, we have to remember that we're talking about 3- and 4-year-olds here. I also worked in a preschool setting a number of years ago. And when I was working with 3- and 4-year-olds, there were behaviors every single day. What this bill is really about is about access to educational equity. We know in preschool classrooms that there are going to be behaviors because they're babies, they're kids. And what this bill is really getting at is the disparities within our education system. We know in Minnesota that Indigenous students are 10 times more likely to be suspended than white students. Black students are 8 times more likely to be suspended than white students. Students with disabilities are twice as likely to be suspended compared to their peers without disabilities. We have an equity problem here in Minnesota, and we know that when there are behaviors in classrooms, not every child is being held accountable in the same way. And the goal of this bill is to ensure that we are addressing educational equity and ensuring that students all have an access to an education, because we know with where kids are with their brain development, at 3 and 4, oftentimes they're too young to even make the logical connections between a punishment and a behavior. And the research is also very clear that kids who are dismissed, that they are facing social, emotional, and academic consequences. And so as we're thinking about this bill, it's important to remember that every child that has a behavior incident in school is not being treated the same way. And this bill is seeking equity.
Thank you, Representative Richardson. Representative West, before we turn to you, I just want to make sure on this A3 that we're really clear on exactly what we're voting on, because as I read this, if there is an ongoing serious safety threat to the child or to other people, including staff, that's already covered in the bill. The amendment wouldn't make any change to that. There's a requirement that there be a series of resources and a number of steps are taken, and that's true whether the amendment passes or not. The difference is the amendment applies to additional circumstances where there's quote unquote violent behavior, which I guess must not involve a serious safety threat. So as Haldeman referenced, if a 3-year-old is striking another child, as little kids do, but there's no safety threat at all, then this would say that in that circumstance, you don't have to bother with any of the steps in subdivision 2. In my mind, that is not appropriate. And I guess I really disagree that what's happening is that we're saying that we'd be encouraging violence. In fact, what we're saying is that when a 3 or 4-year-old is doing something that doesn't pose a serious safety threat, we're going to be basically kicking them right out. And I don't think that that's an appropriate approach at all. So I would urge a no vote just based on the language of this amendment, in my view. And this is not about serious safety threats at all. But Representative West will give you the last word before we vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It seems like you think teachers are trying to suspend students when I think Representative Wozliak covered it well when she was dealing with a violent student. She didn't try and suspend them, even though she could have. And this is about, do you want a kid who stabbed another kid in the eye with the scissors to come back in the room next day while you develop a plan to deal with that? And I think this bill doesn't cover those extreme circumstances. This bill hamstrings teachers and forces them into a good process in most cases, the vast majority of cases, I would say, but we need to watch out for those freak cases too and not take away tools from teachers. So that's what my amendment's about, and I ask for your support.
So with that, Representative West renews his motion that the A3 amendment be adopted. And so with that, we'll have the clerk take the roll on the amendment.
Representative Pinto, Chair.
No.
Representative Katiza-Wattoon, Vice Chair.
No.
Representative Franson.
Yes.
Representative Bonner.
No.
Representative Demuth.
Yes.
Representative Heinzman.
Yes.
Representative Morrison.
No.
Representative Pryor.
No.
Representative Wozliak.
No.
Representative West.
Aye.
There are 4 ayes and 6 nays.
And with 4 nays, wait a second. With 4 ayes and 6 nays, President Katiza-Wattoon,
I apologize.
yeah, indeed, the motion does not pass. The amendment does not prevail. And so with that, we've got the DE2 amendment. And members, what I might, well, I guess we'll do this. So what I might ask is that we adopt the DE2 simply as the author's amendment now to get the bill in the shape the author wishes. I know that there was going to be at least one closing comment before we vote on the bill. But unless folks object, I'd like to just do a voice vote on the adoption of the DE2 because that just gets the bill in the form that the author wishes, and we certainly will do a roll call on passage of the bill as amended. Let's pause for a second. Okay, so with that, then Representative Katiza-Wattoon renews the motion that the DE2 amendment be adopted to put the bill in the form that the author wishes. And so all in favor of adoption of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, members. And now we're moving to final vote on House File 1785 as amended. So Representative Franson, I know at least you had a comment. I jumped the gun on before, please.
Yeah, so that's just another reason why I don't really care for the online stuff because things kind of get confusing. So I kind of gave my closing statements as well, and it sounds like Representative Richardson did as well. But as I said, that this bill is well intended, but I think more thought needs to be given, and the minority members here are willing to assist in that process and really have a bill that we can all support.
Thank you, Representative Franson. Before I move to the bill's author, any final questions or comments from anyone? And not seeing any, so then Representative Richardson, we're going to give you the final word.
Thank you, Chair Pinto and Representative Franson. Thank you so much for your comments as well, and your willingness to continue to talk about these issues. We know that these issues are complicated, they're challenging, and it's going to take community-based responses. So always happy to continue those conversations. So appreciate your willingness to continue to work through. I'll just end in closing that what we're really seeking to address here is a disparity issue. It's an equity issue, and it's a harmful issue that is impacting not only the preschool students, but their families and our overall community. Because when kids are learning at the age of 3 and 4 that they're not wanted or that they don't belong, those have short and long-term consequences. We see it in terms of kids who are suspended. They're less likely to graduate from high school. They're more likely to be in the school to prison pipeline. And those are all challenges that we as a community that we pay for, whether it is with increased incarceration rates or lower wages that people are able to earn. So again, I would just ask for support from the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to present the bill today, Chair.
Thank you, Representative Richardson. Thank you so much for all of your hard work on this issue for so long, and really impressive how you brought together this coalition of community members and parents and schools and teachers and all others calling on us to take this step. And so thank you so much for all of your work in doing that. So with that, Representative Khadija renews her motion that House File 1785 as amended be recommended for placement on the general register. And with that, I'll ask the clerk to please take the roll.
Representative Pinto, Chair.
Aye.
Representative Katiza-Watun, Vice Chair.
Aye.
Representative Franson. Representative Franson.
No.
Representative Bonner.
Aye.
Representative Dameth.
No.
Representative Heinzman.
No.
Representative Morrison.
Yes.
Representative Pryor.
Aye.
Representative Wozniak.
Aye.
Representative West.
No.
There are 6 ayes and 4 nays.
And with 6 ayes and 4 nays, the motion passes and the bill is recommended for placement on the general register, and it's on its way. And again, thank you, Representative Richardson, for all of your work. Members, this may be our final meeting of the biennium. We will see, but that seems likely, at least right now. I want to thank each of you for all of your hard work and discussion over this past 2 years. It's been a real honor and a pleasure to be working with you. As Representative Franson said, it's been a real bummer to not be able to be together. And I want to make sure to acknowledge our staff members, Jody Withers and Alyssa Fritz and Polly Sirk-Fennick and Maris Beltrandi-Rudquist and Annie Mock. And I suppose I should recognize Emily Adrians and Doug Berg as well for their incredible work. And we're so grateful to them. I think that Representative Franson may have wanted to make a comment. I may have seen your hand, maybe not. I thought I saw your hand waving. Oh, something? Yeah, Representative Franson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. It has been a joy to work with each and every one of you, even though we have different viewpoints some of the time. I thought we did a lot of good work in this committee. And as you know, we went into this committee with or at least my members, on the importance of bringing integrity back into that child care assistance program. And while I'm not 100% confident that the department is taking the right approach, we are turning the ship on that program to be run the way it's intended to be. But I just want to say thank you to the staff as well, partisan and nonpartisan. Our committee runs a lot smoother when they're part of the team as well. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate you, and I assume we'll be still in some sort of a contact as the summer goes on. And I want to thank you too. I believe that we work very well together. People behind the scenes that don't see, interaction. We actually do get along, right? This doesn't seem like that sometimes on the floor or in committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. And I will just say, members, I hope that obviously this pandemic has thrown all sorts of things for a loop. But I hope that the work that we've done the past 2 years will not only have made some progress in this particular work, but hopefully has laid a groundwork for future work to help get all kids off to a great start. Members, Francine, you had something else you want to add? Yeah, please.
Yes, and one more thing, I want to thank all of the childcare providers as well for stepping up to the plate and doing the work so that some of our economy can continue flowing on. It's been very stressful for them, and I encourage all of those providers to continue reaching out to their lawmakers about situations that may come up or ideas that they have. And we certainly, Mr. Chair, want to keep that industry healthy, right? And right now it's a little sketchy, and we need to make sure that we can do what we can in order to keep them operating. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. That's an excellent point. I think it was Representative Pryor on a previous recent hearing who reminded us to make sure to be thanking those our amazing providers around the state who've been working under challenging conditions even before the pandemic. And so let's all continue to commit ourselves to helping them and helping every child get off to a great start. So let's continue to keep in touch. I also am very proud that I think in general, despite not being morning people and having a little bit of trouble in the morning sometimes, we've been pretty much on time, and I'm noticing that we are just about finishing in our 90 minutes this time as well. So good stuff. Thank you so much again. And I know that these conversations will be continuing, possibly even in a formal committee hearing, but even if not, let's continue to keep in touch. Thank you all so much. And with that, this meeting is now adjourned. Thanks.